Alberta Aviation Museum, I would like to thank you for joining us here today as we celebrate the latest addition to our collection, the CF-104 Starfighter.
This is the CF-104 Starfighter, the fastest, highest flying fighter ever flown by the Canadian Armed Forces. It's a very important aircraft, not just to Edmonton, but also to Alberta and to Canada. An aircraft that served from 1961 to 1984 in Canada and Europe. This was a time when our Royal Canadian Air Force was many, many times the size of ours today. And it was a time where every flight and every practice was believed to be on the edge of nuclear war. So a very intense time.
There's a timer, there's two timers there, which you need for releasing the bombs. We had a nuclear weapon, a bomb, under the airplane, underneath the fuselage of the airplane. It's called a centerline store, and that was a nuke.
The 104 was often called the Widowmaker, and it was kind of an unfair name. You have to imagine the 104 was designed in the late 1950s as a high-altitude interceptor, and it excelled at that job. But we were moving into the age of multitasking. So this high-altitude interceptor meant to stop enemy bombers from crossing the pole was put into service as a low-level strike aircraft. So instead of Mach 2 at 60,000 feet, it was now being employed at 100 feet or less, flying at 1,000 kilometers or more.
It won't turn very well. It's got hardly any wings. So it takes a long time to do a 360-degree turn.
Approximately half of Canada's Starfighters were lost in accidents, quite a number of aircrew, and the aircraft, of course, gets the blame. But if you talk to people like Art, like Dan Dempsey, like Rick Wall this weekend, they love the aircraft because it was fast, because it was fun. The problem was the mission meant zero error.
651 was flown in 1980, actually, and I was the last pilot in it. My backseater was the second last pilot in it. We ended up taking in a bunch of birds at very low level, at very high speed, and that's not compatible with longevity. The engine quit, and I couldn't get it going again, so we ended up ejecting.
The aircraft created a very large hole in the ground in northern Alberta on Primrose Range and was destroyed. That's why we chose to represent this aircraft. It's a story of what the Starfighter was: fast, efficient, romantic, unforgiving, and it tells how Canada trained the world. A Canadian instructor, a Luftwaffe student. And I see we got the touch-up paint done. The push started 9 years ago when somebody said it was impossible. We went to work, we found the aircraft and brought it in, watching the transformation from its Dutch colors and its Dutch configuration into a Canadian aircraft. And the team I've had the pleasure of working with just instill a lot of pride. They're great people, they do a great job, and working together, we've been able to bring back another piece of history, and a piece of history that lets us tell a vast story for Canada, for Alberta, and for Edmonton.
Every Canadian pilot that flew the 104 overseas went through Cold Lake, so it was an important part of the history of the province, and it's really refreshing to see that it's not going to be forgotten.
On top of having a new fighter jet on display, the Alberta Aviation Museum has overhauled and improved its layout for visitors as well.
It's a pretty good spot. I went there one day because my dad insisted I take him. If it wasn't for him, I never would have seen it. It's good. Tomorrow